Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you another Goosebumps Series 2000 book review. And we're going to be discussing book number 19, Return to Ghost Camp. Now, off the bat, I remember reading this book at least one time as a kid. Maybe it was in my teens. I can't remember. I want to say it was my teens, actually. And I remember thinking that this book was just okay. And after reacquainting myself with this book, I put this off after reading the original Ghost Camp, which was one of my all-time favorite Goosebumps books, because I just wanted to come back to it when I felt ready. And since it was the summertime, late summer, I thought about reading this. And plus, it meets the loose end theme I'm doing these days. I'm trying to wrap up some loose ends I've started. And this one is still kind of a letdown, but I definitely think this book is overhated. I've seen a lot of people bash this book in their Series 2000 ratings. A lot of people don't seem to like this one in their reviews that much compared to the original, and that's fair. But I definitely think this book gets a little overhated. I think there's a lot to offer with this book that people don't give enough credit for. It does its own doozies of things and things wrong. It's about as loose of a sequel as you can ever be for a Goosebumps book, which is not a good thing. And it has its own problems going for it. But other than that, this is a pretty solid book for what it is. It has some really fun ideas. It has some creepy things in the story that hold up, that make it in that good threshold, but it's not great by any means. I don't even think it's great at all. And we'll get into that near the end of the video. So off the bat, if you haven't read this, I recommend it. If you're a fan of the original, this is going to be a disappointment more than likely. But just know that it's just a very loose sequel going into it before we go any further. And just be open-minded with it. Okay? So this book starts off with this character named Dustin. And you learn about how he has won this trip of a lifetime to this 4-week summer camp at this camp called Camp Full Moon. And his brother is also going to the same camp, but he's only doing the 2-week program. So he is leaving by himself on a bus. And he's kind of mentioning that with his family, and his little brother Logan is really jealous and would rather be going. And he makes a comment saying that, you know, Dustin doesn't even want to go to the camp, and that's true. Dustin, he's not a fan of going to the camp in the first place. He's afraid of the dark. He's afraid of insects and bugs. And his little brother Logan likes to torment him. Makes a joke saying that he's going to live in his room while he's gone for 2 weeks. And he kind of makes fun about his fear of bugs and saying there's going to be lots of bugs at camp. And, you know, Dustin tries to shrug it off, but he goes to bed that night, and there's this really creepy dream sequence pretty early on. You know, dream sequences that early can kind of rub people the wrong way, but there's a really creepy dream sequence dealing with this bus driver, and it's really creepy. Gets under my skin a little bit. And once that's revealed to be a nightmare, he wakes up, and it's his day to go to camp. He hops on the bus, says goodbye to his family and his little brother. And while he's on the bus, he goes in the back of the bus, and he's greeted by this kid. And this kid looks to be like an athletic kid. He looks like he has a good head on his shoulder. And the kid's name is Ari. And Ari and Dustin talk, and, you know, Dustin gets this idea that Ari seems kind of cool. He's kind of a prankster. You know, he's kind of low-key chill. Maybe they could be good friends while at this camp. And Ari comes up with this idea to Dustin that it would be a fun practical joke to swap identities to confuse the camp while they're, you know, staying at the camp. So they think it's a fun idea, and they roll with it. They swap identities. They arrive at the camp. Dustin says he's Ari, and Ari says he's Dustin. So in hopes that they go to the same cabin, unfortunately it doesn't work out, and Ari, posing as Dustin, is sent to this really decrepit cabin with bugs and bed bugs and snakes and all that. And Dustin, who's pretending to be Ari, is sent to this really nice cabin with these 3 boys. I forget their names. I know one is named Noah, but these 3 boys are his bunk mates, and they get this really nice cabin. And Dustin, who's pretending to be Ari, they all are praising him. He's like, "Oh, you must be Ari. We've heard a lot about you. This is great." And he starts getting special treatment. He's getting, like, all this candy. He's getting the best bunk. He's getting a bunch of stuff just handed to him. And he doesn't know really what to make of this special treatment. All he knows is that it just feels kind of weird and out of place. Which kind of stems to him asking questions, "Why are you giving me special treatment?" And they won't answer the question, which is kind of ambiguous. Then later on, in the story, a little bit later on, while everyone's distracted, the real Ari comes up to fake Ari, who's Dustin, the main character, and Ari wants to switch places with Dustin. He's like, look, our bunk sucks. You get all this special treatment, and this isn't fair. Let's trade. And Dustin's like, hey, can we hold out for a few more days and then switch? You know, just to be fair. And the real Ari's like, sure, I'll hold out. I'll still be Dustin. So after that, the two boys then go to a campfire later that night. And there, they gather around this campfire, and the camp counselor comes out. And the camp counselor says a camp legend about the Snatcher. And the Snatcher is revealed to be like this spirit, this disguised as a fox, who's said to come down and take a camper once a year as like tribute or something. And this really creeps out Dustin, who's pretending to be Ari. And he gets really weirded out by the story, and he's asking his bunkmates about it, and his bunkmates drag him out to the woods, deep in the woods, like like the original Ghost Camp. They keep using that terminology for some reason. So he gets dragged deep in the woods as kind of like an initiation type of thing, and he encounters a couple of foxes, Dustin, who's pretending to be Ari here. And after this encounter with the foxes, his bunkmates pull him off. He says, it's not your time to meet with the Snatcher. So this whole Snatcher thing apparently is real. And when he asked his bunkmates about this question, like he asked the question about the Snatcher, is it real? And Noah essentially drops a bombshell on him saying, yeah, it's not your time to meet the Snatcher. And he kind of reveals that the Snatcher is real. And Ari, who Dustin is pretending to be, has been chosen to be tribute for the Snatcher this year. And that's why they're giving him all the special treatment. Because eventually he's going to have to be given to the Snatcher as like tribute. And this really upsets Dustin, and he's immediately afraid, and he tries to go the next day and confront Ari. He says, okay, let's switch back. But when he goes to Ari this time, he doesn't want to switch back. And this really upsets him. And then while this is going on, he's starting to notice really weird things with the campers nearby. Like the night before, he saw some campers eating like live bees. And then after talking with Ari, he starts hearing screams in the canoe while they're trying to get a canoe out and go canoeing. And the counselor says it's not safe to go canoeing. And this really upsets him. And then throughout the story, he sees stuff like a camper getting hit in the head with a baseball bat, but the baseball bat goes like right through him, and he's thinking he's seeing stuff. And this continues on a little bit, kind of skipping over some details here, but it continues on a bit until one day the real Dustin wants to go make a phone call to kind of figure out if there's a way he can prove to everyone that, because now he's starting to spiral and he's starting to talk to all the other campers, and he's trying to convince them, hey, I'm the real Dustin. I'm not Ari, and nobody's believing him. So this is going on, and he tries to call his family, but the real Ari disconnects the phone, and Dustin's like, all right, I see what you're doing. Don't worry, my brother Logan's coming in a few days, and I'm gonna show everyone that I'm the real Dustin. So that day comes, and of course, it's revealed by Logan that Logan says that his actual brother Dustin, who's pretending to be Ari, is not his real brother. That the fake Dustin is his real brother. And this kind of throws him for a loop, and he doesn't know what to make of it. He's like, something's really weird's going on, so he kind of runs off into the woods, and he encounters this girl named Laura, who's from this girls' camp he hasn't heard of. And Laura's like, we need to find a way out of here, so we'll meet back here. And all this, just let's meet back here. And that might have been before Logan came or not, but it's right around that point of the story. So he meets up with this girl. They run off. They go back to camp, their own camps. And then there comes a point in the story where there's this big thing where he sees these kids. Dustin, the real Dustin, sees these kids drowning, and nobody's coming to help. And he's starting to realize that this camp is off. And when he learns the truth about Ari, who confronted Logan when Logan came and threatened to hurt him if he didn't, go along with the trick. He's like, something's wrong, and he tries to go to Logan and convince him that, hey, we need to get out of this camp once and for all. We're going to go meet up with this girl. And Logan's like, well, I just got here. So Dustin does what a good brother would do and just leave, and like says, okay, well, here, you enjoy this, and I'm going to go try to figure out something to do. So he goes in search of Laura, and this is where the story gets expedited for the character. So we don't see Ari, the real Ari, after this point, but Dustin ends up in the woods, and he meets Laura, and while he's with Laura, she's like, we got to get out of here, we got to cross this river, and right before that happens, there's a big reveal, and there's a ghost hovering above them, saying, you can't go, you can't go, and essentially this ghost and Laura are fighting over accusing each other of who is the Snatcher and whatnot. So the Snatcher thing finally comes to fruition, and we figure out who the real Snatcher is. And there's this really creepy scene with these green zombie hands coming out of the river and stuff. And there's a really climactic scene where Dustin's hanging on a branch and stuff, and he's hanging on for dear life, and the ghost and Laura are fighting, and there's a big reveal on who the Snatcher is, and the Snatcher takes place, and that transformation is also creepy. And then the climax unfolds, and Dustin may or may not get out alive, but he's still under the guise of being Ari, and he may or may not end on the other side of the river, and the situation may or may not have resolved itself, and the story may or may not end right there before anything else is wrapped up in the story. And that's essentially Return to Ghost Camp. I didn't go over as much as I usually do these days, and that's because it's kind of repetitive and it's kind of the same thing, and there's only really real key points to discuss, and I kind of discussed them all there. But let's start off with the strengths here. For this book, I think what really sold me is the whole switching aspect with Ari and Dustin. That was really interesting. I was really hooked on that. I thought that was a good approach to a camp story, like switching identities. That's never done in Goosebumps. So I thought that was a really interesting thing. I like the dynamics of the characters, especially with Ari and Dustin. They're total polar opposites, and I like their banter with each other. And they both kind of have reasonable reasons why they want to be each other and everything. And that relationship was really cool to explore throughout the book. The ending was also really cool. I like how that wrapped up. There's a lot of gruesome scenes in this, like the bug nightmare and the river with the zombie hand stuff. That was great stuff. That was really creepy and scary stuff in this book. And at the heart of it, it was a really fun, atmospheric camp adventure that I found myself immersed into. I had a lot of sympathy with Dustin. I had a lot of, I'm allergic to bugs, so I really sympathize with him. Bugs are really scary to me, kind of. And yeah, so there's a lot of scare moments to be had in here. There's a lot of interesting dynamics and characters to kind of get involved with. I even like the whole twist behind the Logan and Ari reveal near the end, when it's revealed that the real Ari was, threatening Logan. That was pretty tense stuff. So yeah, this book had a lot of good about it, but there's also some negatives accompanied with this book. And I want to start off with the negatives by just addressing the elephant in the room. This book should not be called Return to Ghost Camp. This book, I think, was another book at some point, and Stein or Scholastic was like, we don't need another just ghost book, camp book. Oh, well, look, Ghost Camp, that was a book before, let's slap that on this. And Stein went in and added little things to kind of loosely tie it to Ghost Camp, and that's as far as it went. There's no previous characters, no nods to the previous camp, which I think was called Camp Spirit Moon. This one is called Camp Full Moon. The whole possession concept of that first book is not in this. And it's just weird. And I don't object to, like, the switching identity parts, but, yeah, it being tied to Ghost Camp is very loose. Very loose. The only things that really tie with Ghost Camp, really, is the things that these ghosts do in the story, kind of. If they're ghosts. Like these I didn't talk about these, but there's one scene where this kid has marshmallows in his teeth and he dips his head in fire. That was pretty fun. This kid is being used as a human bow and arrow practice. Bows were shooting into his skin. Stuff like that from the first book. That's in this. But other than that, this has no business being a Ghost Camp sequel. And honestly, I kind of view it as insulting to label this as a Ghost Camp sequel because I love the original so much. And another negative I have is that the scares with the campers and the ghosts and whatnot, were kind of put on this back burner of this book because the entire book was mainly about the banter between Ari and Dustin about switching back and forth, like going back and forth about switching back identities. And I feel like the book focused a lot in the wrong areas. And that leads into my final negative, which is the climax of this book and the overall ending. A lot of the stuff with real Ari, with Logan coming to the camp, is not resolved. And a lot of people's main reservation with Ari, I think, is that they don't understand Ari, how Ari had hindsight to want to switch identities to begin with. But I think that Ari just had dumb luck and wanted to play this prank. And then once he found out the truth, that's when he wanted to keep Dustin's identity. So a lot of people get kind of confused on that, but I don't really find that part confusing. But I do find it disappointing that we have no resolution with the real Ari and Logan. That's never wrapped up because the way the ending ends the story. Also, these ghost characters, like that, especially the ghost character that appears at the end, I didn't see that character becoming the ghost to come help. And it also kind of reformats the story. So the story was set up that Ari was supposed to be this sacrifice to the Snatcher, but at the end there's kind of this reveal or notion that Ari is supposed to be the savior, and that's why he was chosen. But they still don't know that it's him, that it's Dustin. So it just comes off weird. And how the story ends, it just leaves so many questions unanswered, and it comes off kind of choppy, and yeah, it just leaves me really disappointed. I don't feel like the story's complete. This is one of the shorter Goosebumps books. It's less than 120 pages. You can add at least 10 pages, Stein, to wrap up the story. I think it's just a true throw in the towel ending for Stein. He just gave up and didn't want to write anymore. So yeah, that was really disappointing. And overall, I think this book just comes out in the same vein as most average Goosebumps books do. It's very flawed. It has its issues. And for all the issues I mentioned, I collectively deducted, I think, 1.2 points off, and I gave this book a 3.8 out of 5, which is a middle to high C for me. I think this book is definitely overhated, but I definitely do think that it's flawed. And in the meat of it all, it's good and average, but that's about it. It's slightly lower than Ghost in the Mirror for me, but definitely above Werewolf in the Living Room. So yeah, that's my thoughts of Return to Ghost Camp. Kind of a lackluster sequel when you think about it, but still a good book in its own right. Does not need to be a Ghost Camp sequel, but I would still recommend this if you haven't read it. Try this one out. It's worth it. It might be worth your time. I know some people really don't like it, and then some people actually love it out there. It's very polarizing, and then a lot of people are just happen to be in the middle like me. So yeah, let me know down in the comment section what you thought about Return to Ghost Camp. Do you love this or do you hate this? I'm dying to know, and I'll see you next time.